Well, welcome. This is an exciting day. I know I have so many women who were so excited to see this masterclass going to happen with you, Terrell, and I am looking forward to this. It seems like everybody I told about this, like, what's the topic? And I told them, they go, oh my gosh, yes. So
Nice.
this is very, very exciting. So yay. Okay, so what I'm going to do is uh, just have you just give a little intro, if you don't mind sharing a little bit about you, who you are, and how you came into this space. And then we'll do all the questions and the interviews and the information, because I'm looking forward to this just as much as everybody else. So thank you for being here. I'm really excited.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to, share my expertise with you guys and really help clear some things up and answer your questions. So yeah, there's no such thing as TMI. So don't be shy, ask away. But my name is Terrell Baldock. I help strong women over 40 lift heavy, get sweaty, and feel brave in their bodies. Um, Now, how I got into this work is well, I guess it's a natural progression, I would say. I myself started going through perimenopause in my mid 30s. Um, and I really didn't understand what was happening to my body, the things that, you know, um, so as I was going through this progression, and my symptoms kept changing, I started noticing other things happening, like things like sleep and stress. The way I managed stress was different. And um, so when I got into working with women over 40, it was understanding where they're at, not only physically, but physiologically as well. Well, and, mentally and emotionally too. Because I was finding, like I said, what was working for me early on in my 20s and 30s just wasn't working for me in my 40s anymore. So I really had to reassess and learn what it's like to live a healthy and active lifestyle as a woman in the stage of life, and so yeah, I was kind of thinking but what's interesting was that because I was um, perimenopausal earlier in my 30s or earlier in the stage, I was able to have a family or a couple of kids in perimenopause. So really started seeing that transition, or for me anyway, because it happened so quickly and so early. I really wanted to help women regain that sense of control because I felt like I was losing a lot of that, right? And then finding yourself and getting yourself back to a place to, where you can feel whole or you do feel whole. So that's kind of been little bit about my journey, kind of the work that I do with women. And yeah, I guess, yeah, there it is.
Yeah, well, nothing better than real life experience, right? And going
Yeah.
through it yourself. I,
Oh, yeah.
I can relate with that. And no, I think that's really a powerful first step. So let me just make sure everything is working, because I don't want anybody to be listening to this on online and not being able to hear. So I am not seeing any questions on the sound. So fingers crossed, but I know this recording is working as well. So we'll have this, and amazing. Okay. So tell us a little bit about the first, like, what you experienced, and your, how you started, just turning around and uh finding what was relevant for you. I mean, I know, and it's probably a very big challenge in that space.
Yeah, yeah, but it's been positive for me, although there was a lot of learning. And so for me, yeah, it was a lot of trial and error, if you will. But I also, worked in taking courses to help me
Yeah.
understand better what was happening in my own body first before I could really help guide, my clients through what was going on with their bodies and their minds. But like I said, it was more of a natural transition. I started, working more with pregnant and postpartum women, like I said early on. But when you're going through these changes, you know, working with women who are not in a similar place is really challenging. So last year, I really started focusing on, when I started focusing on working on myself, that's when I started focusing more on how can I apply this to my coaching practice with women, who are wanting something similar. And what's interesting is that I also specialize in pelvic health. So that's really where things started. And I found for me, so I was about 3 months postpartum with my daughter 8 years ago when I got my prolapse diagnosis. And what I was finding as, I was going through my own journey and transitioning through, from being a, new mom or a recent mom to a woman going through perimenopause, was that, I'm trying to think. You know, I started hearing more stories and experiences of other women, and it was like, okay, I'm not alone. So it was, like I said, it was just something that was just very natural and, empowering, if you will, when you're kind of learning new things about your body and you have, your clients who are also in a similar space who are like, yeah, like I went through this too. And knowing that you're normal, I think is just really helpful because especially, for me going through that perimenopausal, early on, especially where my mood was impacted, it was really helpful to know that some of these things are manageable and, you can, have an active and healthy lifestyle to support where you're at currently.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's definitely, that's good to know. So I'm gonna just ask because I don't have, I mean, more than just what I've experienced in my challenges. I don't have a
Mhm.
lot of knowledge, so I might be asking some really basic questions. And I know
That's
there's no
okay.
such thing as a dumb question,
No.
but and then I also have questions that I know some of the women has shared with me to ask that weren't able to be on here live, so we can jump into those. But if you don't mind, just starting from the basics, like explaining to those that maybe don't have a clear understanding of what does it mean when you're talking pelvic floor and prolapse and all these, like just basic knowledge on those.
Yes. Yes, and that's an important place to start, right? Because if you
Yeah.
know what it is, then you know how to get, navigate it. Yeah, with so 1 in 3 women in their lifetime will experience some sort of pelvic floor dysfunction. That could be prolapse. So prolapse is where one or more of your pelvic organs will descend into or bulge through the vaginal wall. And there's different types of prolapse. So if you guys have questions about that, I'm happy to answer it. I know that we're kind of on a time crunch and I could spend hours talking about this. So yeah, so that's what prolapse is, and that's what I have. I actually have two. There's stress urinary incontinence. It's another common one with women in midlife. So that is where you pee yourself when you don't intend to. This can happen when you're laughing, sneezing, coughing, or even exercising. Um, and then there's some other common ones that we don't talk about a lot with what are like pain with intimacy, or even intimacy where it's not as satisfactory or yes, as it once was, right? So there are some things there that are common with women who are, in that midlife space. There's some other things that are, give us little hints like lower back pain. Maybe we feel a little weakness in our core, that kind of thing. But the good news is that all of this stuff is manageable. Actually, maybe I should take a step back. I always do this and I get going and then it's all exciting to me. But So take a step back with prolapse. Some of the symptoms that women experience with that is that they feel like bulging, or they feel like something is falling out of their vagina. And it is also common to experience a rectocele. So, we talk a lot about what happens in the vagina, but there is that prolapse that can happen through the rectum as well. Now, I don't see those as much, but they do come up. But the most common ones that I work with clients is a bladder prolapse. So there's the bladder prolapse. I do work with a rectocele, so that's where the rectum will bulge through the vagina. So there's two with that one. There's the descent of the rectum itself, or the rectum bulging into the vaginal wall. So those are two different ones. But the good news, as I said, is that these things are all manageable and navigatable. A lot of my clients will see a big reduction in symptoms, or even an elimination of symptoms. So it's really dependent on the individual as far as that goes, and what kind of work is needed. But yeah, so those are the common things that I work with. And as I said, these are all very common things that happen to women as we age, right? Especially the stress urinary incontinence piece and those changes, right? And there's also some dryness that I didn't mention, and there's lots that you can do with that as well.
Yeah, I think that just what you just said, that it's manageable and that you can work moving forward. I think that is helpful for so many women, because I think, myself included, like the urinary thing is, yeah, that's
Mm,
something I've always struggled with after the children were born.
yeah.
Always been told to do Kegels, not really knowing until
Mm,
later how to do those properly. So that was, maybe not helpful for me. But I think just the knowledge for women to know, okay, you can do something about it. You're not stuck
yeah.
or have to just live with it, right? I mean, with age, is it ever a point like it's too late to take action? Like where,
Not at all. No, not at all. I work with women of all ages and stages. My oldest client was in her mid 70s. And yeah, she noticed a big difference. And she was somebody that had had a surgical repair as well. So, and that also goes to show that surgery isn't always going to solve that problem either. But yeah, I've had clients who are in their 70s. I've had clients who have never had children. I've had clients who have had lots of children. It's never too late to start working on your health. I say pelvic health or health, but pelvic health to me is a window into your overall health, and reproductive health and all of that. And if there's something changing there, then we should absolutely take a look into it and see how we can make this better for you, because you don't have to live with it just because you're a woman, just because you've had babies, just because you're getting older, or whatever the reasons are.
yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I think it's so, that's why I was so drawn to you. When I saw your expertise, I thought this is really cool. I mean, it's something that most people don't hear or talk enough about. And I think it's so important that, you not only talk about it, but you're working with people to, move out of that place of struggle. Uh, so what are, I know you talked about childbirth and aging or some of the issues, but what are some of the common problems, I guess, that bring upon these issues?
Yeah, good question. So every woman's different. And I think that's the biggest thing to recognize, is that what works for you may not work for somebody else, or what you're experiencing may be different than somebody else, right? But some of the common things that I see with my clients is um, so they start to experience things, if they still have a cycle, around their cycle. Now, as that changes throughout perimenopause and midlife, they may notice that their symptoms are more frequent. There's nutrition. Some people, if they eat something and it makes them feel bloaty, there's those kinds of things, or sometimes even having like eating really heavy foods and putting pressure down onto the pelvic floor. Not to say that you shouldn't eat those things. That's not where I'm coming from at all. I'm not a restrictive person. Eat what you enjoy. Just know that that could bring on some stuff, right? Um, Intra-abdominal pressure or air in the belly is another big one. And this is just basically how your body manages the air in your belly. For a lot of women, what they end up doing is they bear down on their pelvic floor. So that means that they're pushing down on their pelvic floor instead of doing that Kegel where it needs to come up and in, right? So when they're pushing down, or when that air is pressing down onto the pelvic floor then also comes down. And that's where some of those symptoms can happen. So training your body to navigate that intra-abdominal pressure can be really helpful. Another telltale sign, as I mentioned, when I mentioned that pain with intimacy is something that's, we can look at pain or unsatisfactory intimacy, that can be an indication of rather an overly tight pelvic floor or a weak pelvic floor. So those are some things that we can address as well, right, with pelvic floor muscle training. So there are a number of things that can contribute. So like hormones and all of that other fun stuff. But again, it's knowing what brings on those things and navigating through them.
Okay, that makes sense. So, because yeah, I did learn that, in my understanding, it just like the weakness or the like says the weaker, but it can be the tightness that can be an issue
Mhm.
as well. So, what would the differences in those two scenarios? I know everybody's different and everybody has it,
Mhm.
but what would be some of the common reasons for the differences in the maybe the tightness or even the weakness?
Yeah, great questions. Lots of different reasons. So first, if a woman has a hypertonic or an overly tight pelvic floor, it could be a number of things. And a lot of what I see with my clients is that they have these symptoms, and what they do is they tense up so that they guard it and keep things from happening. That's a big one. But what that's doing is not only putting tension on your muscles, right? But it's putting additional tension on your pelvic floor that's already carrying a lot of tension as it is. And when you're carrying a lot of tension in your pelvic floor, it can't support those organs the way that it can, right? It needs to be able to move. So if you're working with a tight pelvic floor, then something that we need to introduce to it is movement and relaxation, and training the automaticity. And what that means is you're training the pelvic floor to coordinate movement when you move, right? And that's another thing that we don't know as women. We don't know how to coordinate things like our breathing and our pelvic floor with all of that. But what's interesting is that your pelvic floor is designed to move when you move. So if it's overly tight, it can't move in that same way. If you're looking to strengthen your pelvic floor, maybe, it's not tight, but it is on the weak side and you need to bring strength into it. That's when I would introduce a Kegel, or introduce Kegels with exercise. So I generally, if someone doesn't know how to do a Kegel, if they're absolutely stuck on how to do a Kegel, or if I'm teaching them how to do a Kegel, I'll teach them from a laying down position. But what we're doing is we're trying to move upward. So if we're starting off with a glute bridge, then I'm going to move them to a body weight squat and coordinate their pelvic floor or that Kegel with that squat so that the pelvic floor knows when it needs to do the work. So those are a couple of different ways. With a tight pelvic floor, again, I would want to introduce movement in there first and then gradually, or then include a Kegel. Um, But the priority with that is just getting the pelvic floor moving. And for a lot of women, that's all that they really need to do, even before thinking about Kegels.
Wow. Well, that's a whole new that's a whole new way of thinking for what I was taught. Like, just do your Kegels, and
Yeah.
yeah, and it was just about, to me, it was just tightening. Like, if you're gonna hold in your pee, like that was what I was taught. Later,
Yeah.
like it says, the lifting of the, that changed everything for me.
Mm.
So what you're saying is you teach first, like whether it's the laying down position or whatever, just how to do it first, and then
Mm.
incorporating it into the actual workouts, the activities. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you don't want to do it forever. And I'd only do that. I do that with a woman that is experiencing symptoms.
Yeah.
If you're not experiencing symptoms, then I don't generally worry about the Kegel, or I worry about like the pelvic floor piece, because not every exercise is going to bring something on, right?
Yeah.
So, and then what we want to do is move away from that Kegel, because again, we want to train the pelvic floor to do the work on its own. Because who wants to think about, lifting their vagina up and in every time they move? It's going to slow you down. So we want to progress you so that you don't have to be so dependent on that.
I love that. I love that. So in terms of the basic, so women, and when I think we both work with women over the age of 40. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's exactly who you target or work with, but that's been um my group of women. So if you don't mind speaking on, how would each individual know, like, what are the symptoms or the issues that she might be experiencing that might need to have this be addressed?
Yeah. So there's several, and you might experience one, you might experience them all, or maybe just a few. But with prolapse, or pelvic organ prolapse, a lot of women will describe like something is falling out. So whether it's like a tampon, I had a client describe it as like marbles, felt like marbles were in there, air bubbles. They feel heaviness or bulging. That's kind of what it's described. For me, when I experience my prolapse, it feels like a little marble, and then I stand up, adjust myself, and then I'm good again. Um, so so those are some symptoms with prolapse. Stress urinary incontinence can show up with that as well. Lower back pain can show up. And what's interesting with that is that if you're finding that you're going to massage therapists and you're working your core and you're doing all these things to reduce your lower back pain and you're not getting anywhere, it may be an indication that you've got something going on with your pelvic floor. So that might be something worth looking into. With stress urinary incontinence, again, it typically happens with laughing, sneezing, coughing, or even exercise. And that can be managed as well. And it can be a little drop, it can be a full flow, whatever, like it doesn't matter what it is, it's something that can be managed. And what was the other one? So those are the most common ones that I deal with. But then you're also looking at, pain with intimacy, intimacy that isn't, satisfying. Those are some indications as well that there might be something going on. There's also things like pain or discomfort with orgasm, so there's all of these hidden things that we just don't talk to each other about, or we're told, well, have a glass of wine, or it's just normal. And when really it's just an indication that something else may be going on. And if those muscles are tight, well, then we can work on that. If those muscles are loose, or if they're need strengthening, then we can work on that. But yeah, so those are the big things that I typically see. And
Wow.
then there's also like constipation. So if you're struggling to go poo, or if you're straining to go pee or straining to urinate, those are other ones that show up too.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's, yeah, very interesting, very important to know. I mean, even just to, someone who's not even thinking that, like you're saying, I mean,
Mhm.
constipation, I don't even, consider that part of it. But if you, yeah, I mean, just good things to understand and possibly look into if that's an issue. Um, so in terms of uh, a client coming to you, and I just want to commend you on the fact that opening up this topic and having clients come feel comfortable to come to you, because like
Yeah.
you said, it's like, how many years, these topics have been taboo, and
Yeah.
TMI, you don't talk about that.
Nope.
Yeah, it's just not something you want to be, um, associated with, or people know this, but it's so important, right, to take control and fix what's not working. So I guess I have a two-part question. I guess I'll break it up into, so if somebody comes to, I understand everybody's different. It's kind of like some asking, okay, how do you get into shape if,
Right.
so
Yeah.
there's so many levels and layers, but as just a general broad, is there a way to explain, like, a client comes to you, what is the protocol? How do you work with that client?
Another great question. Yeah. So, um, generally, I work with my clients for 3 to 4 months. We start always with building the foundation, figuring out what works for them, what doesn't, what they can tolerate well. Also introducing the pelvic floor muscle training piece into it, so that they can learn how to coordinate their pelvic floor with exercise, learn how to Kegel properly, and also bring awareness to not only just their pelvic floor, but the rest of their body. So there's a lot of learning going on in that first foundation phase. But we're working a lot with lightly loaded exercises, low impact, and we're progressing where we can to get to another level of intensity. Um, so that lasts about 4 to 6 weeks, depending on the person. And then we kind of go into like a build. Now, what I like to do is, this is where we really focus on building strength, building muscle, building endurance. We increase the intensity a little bit of the workouts so that you're getting challenged, you're still getting, you're working towards those pelvic health goals and as well as your overall health and fitness goals. But this is just the next step in there. So we're increasing the intensity a little bit. Then we go in, and that again will last about 4 to 6 weeks. What I like to do is, so this is where we start adding load or adding more weights, and depending on where the client's at, we may go into barbells right away, or, we may have to um, keep it at a lower impact just to navigate and monitor those symptoms for a little while. And then we go into another progress phase, or so we're working on progression. Because again, the goal is to take that build and then continue that and make sure that, we're still seeing that progress in those 4 to 6 weeks. So this is very kind of client based, because I do have some clients who want to, lift heavy, but then I have clients that want to run. So that's kind of where we start working on those more specific goals. And then there's the maintenance phases after that, right? So what we're working through over these months, I want to make sure that you can maintain that and continue to progress. So we're still working on that piece. So again, 3 to 4 months, and with it being very individual, as I mentioned, if you are somebody who experiences symptoms through hormonal changes, then we're tracking through that. And I like to track for about 90 days just to uncover patterns, but sometimes we can figure things out in less time than that. If you're somebody that needs nutritional help with that, maybe it's constipation that's an issue and we need to work on that. We're going to address that in the program as well. So that part is really different depending on the individual, but the first 8 weeks, it's about, building a strong foundation, building awareness in your body, building strength, building muscle, and building confidence really, and feeling that, you're not broken, because a lot of the women that come to me, that's how they're feeling. They're feeling broken and defeated. And you don't have to keep feeling that way, and it doesn't have to last, like, so yeah, in the first 8 weeks, the foundation piece and the build piece, and then, we generally will go to town. But again, it's based on the individual, but that's generally how
Mm.
I like to structure things. And that's just naturally how they move, right? So moving from client to client, it's just generally how it's flowed over the years.
No, that's amazing. Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a progress and everybody's different, but to have that the system,
Mhm.
systems do work, and they're for a reason. So as an example, for one of the major issues that I hear a lot of women say is the leaky. It's just
Yeah.
I can't run like I used to. I can't do jumping jacks all the time.
Mhm.
So what could somebody expect working with you for like 3 months or whatever the time frame would be? What can they expect from having that become an issue, like not wanting to do the things? What can they expect with the training through um, the program?
Yeah. So a lot, many of my clients will start noticing a difference within the first few weeks. So if the goal is jumping, what we're doing again is building that strength piece in so that you can jump.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, we're still working on the pelvic floor piece. We're still doing that. We're still working on coordination, and what we want to do is then also integrate, like, and include breathing.
Yeah.
So the way you would breathe with strength training would be a little different than you would with higher impact jumping or plyometrics or that kind of thing. So we would have to find a breathing strategy that works. And for example, jumping, a lot of women jump and they're very rigid when they jump. So let's work on that jump and do that recoil. I call it springy knees, land with springy knees and soft feet, right? So we're working a lot on that. If it's running, again, we're working on building that strength. We might need to work on some unilateral strength. And what that is just training um, one side of the body to match the other side of the body, right? Because
Mhm.
sometimes you're stronger on one side than the other, and your pelvic floor just doesn't know how to keep up with that. So we start there. And yeah, I have my clients running, within 8 weeks. So I do have like a couch to 5K type program where we walk you through from prolapse to running 5K.
I love that.
So, and how we structure that is just really based on what that person can do. And
Mm.
then again, it's progression.
Wow. No, that's really exciting. I mean, it's such a different way of thinking than just live with it and deal with it. And, you know,
Right?
yeah, it's just, it's mind blowing. It really is. So, okay, I had a couple questions because some of the ladies, when they weren't able to come on, they wanted to ask a few questions. So, okay, so we had Sarah asked, does coffee affect your pelvic floor muscles, stimulant and or cold?
Okay, so I love coffee and I would never tell anybody to give it up. But it can be irritating to the bladder, right? So keeping yourself hydrated can be really helpful. Um, and yeah, especially keeping yourself hydrated can be really helpful. But some women do notice that, yeah, if they have a cup of coffee, they might be a little bit leakier, or they might feel a little bit
Mhm.
more of something, right? But yeah, if you're drinking enough, because what can happen if you're dehydrated and then drinking coffee and then it irritates the bladder, what can happen is that your So the urine that's in there can become concentrated, and that's kind of where things become irritated, and that's how women can become leaky. So drink, if you're going to have coffee, I suggest starting off with a glass of water before your coffee. But if coffee isn't an issue for you, then I wouldn't worry about
Okay.
giving it up or cutting back or whatever. Yeah.
So more along the lines of just being hydrated properly
Yeah.
is going to really kind of offset.
That'll be helpful. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And she also had a follow-up question. They were different, so I wanted to separate them. What exercises can I do to strengthen my pelvic floor other than Kegels?
Yeah, all of them, all of the exercises. You can do them all. And I mean that you can. So really, again, it just goes back to what exercises. So all of the exercises are going to strengthen your pelvic floor. Your pelvic floor is activating pretty much with every movement, right? So like I said, I don't have my clients doing Kegels too long. But if you are not experiencing any kind of issues, then I wouldn't worry about strengthening your pelvic floor if you don't have any symptoms. It does suggest that the automaticity is there and that things are working. But if you are experiencing things, going back and assessing your pelvic floor function. Is it overly tight? Do you feel a lot of tension? Are you feeling weaker, or a little bit more open down there? Do you need just to relax, right? Because I might go into, so the other thing, we always kind of go, what exercises matter, but it's not the exercise itself, I guess is what I'm trying to get at. Um, you know, I will start, if you want to learn how to do a Kegel and integrate it with an exercise so you can see how it feels. What you can do is you can Kegel or lift your vagina. Remember, lifting it up and in instead of pushing it down. So lift it up and in on every exhale. So if you want to try it with a glute bridge laying on your back and with your feet flat on the floor, or you can try it in a squat, so you would inhale as you lower yourself down, exhale, Kegel as you lift up, right? And you can do that with a glute bridge as well if you're like, I don't know how this feels, because it does take practice, right? Like it's going to take practice for you to, figure out how your pelvic floor is supposed to move. So yeah, it's not just the exercise, it's kind of the system that the pelvic floor is attached to.
So it's with the movement is really what you're saying is the most important part. It's not just sitting there and doing a bunch of tightening.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. That makes so much sense. And it just, yeah, I mean, duh, right? But nobody said that before. Um, and she also wrote one last question from Sarah. How come some women are affected by this and some aren't? It's not fair.
It's not fair. I agree. I agree.
Is there any differentiating factors? Obviously, yeah, everybody's got different things, but anything from what you've seen that makes it more of an issue?
So what we know, there's so much still up in the air when it comes to pelvic health because it is still fairly new and the research, it's coming, but we don't have all the answers yet. So that is something we don't have the answer to. But as far as I've seen, it's random. It's not because you've done anything wrong. It's not because you didn't take care of yourself well. I was, personal trainer before I was diagnosed with my prolapse. After my daughter was born, I was still diagnosed, right? So yeah, it's really hard to say why some women will, be diagnosed with something or experience pelvic floor dysfunctions and other women don't. I agree, it's not fair. But again, what I want to stress is that you can still have that full, healthy, active life and manage those symptoms, if not eliminate them. So it's not something that you have to live with forever.
That's powerful. Yeah. I mean, it's just like anything else. I mean, why did this happen? But yeah, if you have the ability to do something about it, then it shouldn't even be a concern of, yeah, the unfairness.
Yeah.
Just do it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. So Tanya asked, I'd love to know the best way to know my transverse abdominis is engaged.
Mm. So that's a good one, and I love that one. So what I do, and how I cue it with my clients is on that exhale, I have them imagining that they're pulling their hip bones into their belly button, and that'll activate the deep or the transverse abs.
Nice. Oh, I like that.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, just to geek out a little bit
Yeah.
here, is that your pelvic floor does work with your transverse abs. So what's really interesting is if you take that deep breath in and on the exhale, you purse your lips, your transverse abs will activate. So
Ooh,
it's pretty cool.
that's really fun. Everybody's going to be
Yeah.
doing it now. All right. And some questions that I saw were just things that a lot of women wonder. Let's see. So let's just break down what we've already talked about. We talked about aging, causes. So how do you treat the prolapse? Is that different than, say, just pelvic floor health in general? Like, is there a different treatment to?
Uh, Not really. No, it all kind of works about the same. The only thing that I would say would be different is that, yeah, no, my training protocol wouldn't be different for that. No, that's a really good question. You have me thinking here, but
Mhm.
um no, the only thing that I would do differently again is just it's a very individual thing. Yeah.
So based on, yeah, that individual's
Right.
issue.
Yeah.
No, yeah, that makes sense. Um, and so in training effectively, your protocol, and correct me if I if any of this incorrect, your protocol with helping these women train more effectively is basically teaching them how to do the activity and strengthen the pelvic floor at the same time.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Perfect. Amazing. So I love all that. So what about your how did I want to ask that? So your protocol working with these clients, of course, everybody's, their own version, their own working with them as they're going through the process with you, and seeing the results. What has been some of the most impactful results that your clients have achieved?
Oh, wow. You know, so many of my clients have had really incredible results. I'm working with a client now. Her name is Wendy, and she's in her 60s actually. But she's a competitive power lifter and was told not to lift anymore because of her prolapse, right? Well, luckily she found me, and we've been together now for about 8 months. She just competed a couple weeks ago and had broke a record. She's broken a couple powerlifting records, yeah, in Australia. So there's that. But I've had clients, I had a client who was a firefighter and had to navigate those symptoms as a part of her job, right? So, getting her back into her livelihood and the training that she enjoys. I worked with a Boston Marathon runner, and getting her back into running was pretty incredible. Um, yeah, there's just so many. There's just so many. And I think that's what's amazing about opening up this conversation, because it has been so taboo, and it has been, um, very hush hush, because we just, who wants to talk about these things, right? Um, but in the work that I do and seeing how it impacts my clients, it's like your body is so much stronger and so much more capable than what it says in some textbook, right? Like, and I guess even seeing some of the mindset changes, when I work with women, as I was saying, they feel broken. They feel like they're not going to be able to do the things that they enjoy doing anymore. And for them, that's a big loss. It's a loss of identity. They grieve through it. So going through that process and then seeing them come out on the other side, and seeing them feel brave in their bodies to go power lift, to go play soccer, to lift up their kid. I had clients who were told to avoid picking up their kids. It's like, no, like this isn't life, so seeing them live their lives to the fullest is just incredible.
Oh my gosh, that just it's so that just be emotional. Those type of advancements and celebrations when someone's been told not to pick up their child or not to do the
Yeah.
things that make their heart sing, like wanting to do
Mhm.
powerlifting. And yeah, I mean, what a devastating prognosis they're given. And like it says,
Mhm.
thank goodness that they found you. Thank goodness that coaches like you exist, because this is like, yeah, this is what we're able to achieve. And there's, like I said, so much more research coming out on it and studies. And I
Thank
love
goodness.
that. Yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, so talking on, we talked about the activities and the movements and all. Talking about the sexual, just in discomfort, lack of
Mhm.
ability, what are some of the strategies that have helped clients in that area?
So this can be quite complicated, as you know, like intimacy, there's a lot that can be tied up in that, a lot of emotions.
Yeah.
So where I come in is I work through that relaxation piece. So I help them l- loosen up their pelvic floor because they are so tight. But I'm also helping them and coaching them through a lot of anxiety. Um, because now my scope in that is only, so much. And then if I see that it's, like it would be of service to go to therapy or something like that, then I definitely refer out. Um, but a lot of the women, yeah, the intimacy side can be hard. But I start with where I would start in that foundation phase and just bringing awareness to your pelvic floor, because that's step number one. Teaching my clients, how to breathe into their pelvic floor so that their pelvic floor moves. And a lot of it is also monitoring their progress. So if they have an overactive pelvic floor, and I guess I should mention, I'll also refer to a pelvic floor physiotherapist or a physical therapist if you're in the US, because what they can do is they can go and do internal work. So they can do like trigger point therapy, things like that. So there's a lot of different options with the pain and intimacy part. Another option that women have is to use a wand. But where I would, suggest before that is working on the relaxation piece, because if pain with intercourse is part of the problem, then chances are anything else entering into the vagina is going to be painful as well, right? So working on that relaxation piece, if there is emotional or mental support, mental health support needed, maybe going to a therapist. Pelvic floor physiotherapy is another great option. um, and really it's just a time thing. It could take, like a couple weeks just to really get things moving again and then working on the progression. Um, and then just following up, right? So if pain-free intercourse is the goal, then it is something that we definitely talk about, not in like, hey, how did last night go? But it's like, how is like, are you noticing it feeling different? How are you feeling emotionally, and really focusing in on that emotional piece. I do a lot of, so I'm also trained in trauma-informed care. So I bring a lot of that into that intimacy piece, because it is so it's so different depending on the woman, and just knowing, and experiencing some of the things with my clients, it can be quite emotional for them. But again, it is manageable. You have hope, and you don't have to live with it.
Wow. Yeah, so powerful. Oh my gosh, on so many levels. Yes, definitely. Look, there's a lot of layers there. I can tell, and yeah, and then
Yeah.
be able to, know exactly how to work through, and whether you help them seek outside assistance, or whether that, I mean, that just, it's all empowering. It's like hope, right? Hope, and
Yeah.
yeah, freedom from feeling like you're stuck and locked in.
Right, exactly.
I think that's so powerful. All right, I'm not sure if any other questions came up, so let me just double check. Um, yeah, this is really good stuff, Terrell. I'm so excited that we're able to speak. Okay. Oh, somebody did have a question. All right. So Katrina asked, what about urinary urgency? Once I know that I'm on the way to the restroom is when I have a problem, not coughing or etc. Why is that? Good question.
Good question. Yeah. Oh, very good question. So something that I would look into, now, to get specific, I would need to kind of do an assessment and ask some deeper questions. But just off the top of my head, what I would look into, would be, um, if there's tension or tightness in the pelvic floor there. But urgency is different than stress urinary incontinence. I mean, I think I just had an incident this morning where it's like, oh, I gotta go. And it's like, you gotta run. And you're mapping out bathroom, whenever you go to the mall or something, you're mapping out a bathroom, where's the next bathroom? But really, it is a little bit different than the stress urinary incontinence. So I would start looking at like a tight pelvic floor. That's kind of where I would start first. Um, Breathing, and obviously, not holding it in too long so that you don't have any accidents, right? Now, if you're feeling like you're over full, because a lot of the times we get busy and we're holding on to our pee, right? Um, the overflow can cause that urgency, right? Um, so that's kind of where I would start. But if you want some more guidance on that, yeah, feel free to reach out and we can kind of dig a little bit deeper. Because,
Okay.
yeah, without really knowing and being able to reproduce it, it's so hard to say.
Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. Good question. But yeah, there might be other factors to discuss there. So that's definitely yeah, next step. So, and I would definitely like to share how women can connect with you and contact you if so they do need that next step, or that support or help, or to start
Yeah.
working with you. I think that would be a great asset to have that. Before we do talk about that, is there anything else that you think I've missed out on question wise, or any questions that weren't asked that you think is important for women to know?
Goodness, you know what? You guys have asked so many great questions. I'm like, what? Just off the top of my head. You know what? Let's talk about the Kegel again. We'll come back to the Kegel. Um, because you did mention, Kathy, that you were told to do Kegels. You didn't really know how to do them until recently. But what can happen with Kegels is that things can go the other way. So we talked about your pelvic floor becoming overactive. What a lot of women do is they bear down on their pelvic floor. So instead of it lifting up and in, they're pushing downwards with Kegels. But when we start introducing Kegels, what a lot of women do is they leave it in that state of contraction. So instead of relaxing it, it's always tight. So this is where your pelvic floor can become tight. And this is where you can start to experience things like that bulgy heaviness or leaking feeling. Maybe even lower back pain as well. So when it comes to doing Kegels, not every woman needs to do them. If you're not experiencing issues with your pelvic floor, then that suggests that your pelvic floor is meeting that demand. So, you can probably skip out on the Kegels and you'll be fine. However, if you are experiencing symptoms, then it's important to know whether your pelvic floor is tight, because if it is, then adding other Kegels in there may make things a little bit tighter and go in the other direction. So that's where we want to introduce movement back into the pelvic floor and bring that awareness piece before introducing Kegels. So if your pelvic floor is tight, and you're experiencing things like stress urinary incontinence or peeing yourself when you're not intending to, anything with prolapse, so feeling like the bulgy feelings, heaviness, or even with lower back pain, maybe start with the pelvic floor piece where you're relaxing your pelvic floor before introducing Kegels. Because so many women are just told to do Kegels without a proper assessment of what their pelvic floor actually needs. And then when they start doing those Kegels, and they're like, my symptoms aren't going away, because that's the other thing too. I had a client, well, I've had several clients who were doing Kegels religiously for 3 years. And I had her stop. I was like, okay, let's just stop doing the Kegels to see what happens. Well, her symptoms went away, right? So it's not just about doing the Kegel. It's not just about doing like a hard Kegel like this. It's about bringing movement into the pelvic floor. So if your pelvic floor isn't there yet, that's okay. We can work on that so that you can get all of those benefits in a leak-free or bulgy-free life.
Yeah, so interesting, and so I wish we all knew this earlier, but it's good to know this now. Yeah, it's important, right? Not just give out that everybody do the same thing. We don't know if everybody needs that. Like you says, if you don't need it, you don't need to do it. And maybe if you're doing it wrong, or you don't, it's causing more of a problem, then stop doing it.
Yeah, well, and how are you supposed to know, right?
Right.
I remember my first lesson of doing Kegels was a pamphlet the day that I was leaving the hospital with my son, right? I was like, oh, okay, what's
Yeah.
this? And I didn't even do them. So
I know, I know. Hold in. I was like, hold in your pee. If you're holding in your pee, and I was like, okay. So that's how I
yeah.
did them. And yeah, I know so many people were doing them that way. So one more question you brought up again on the prolapse with the back pain. Is there any um, effects later on from back pain due to prolapse in terms of, like, say, activity or day-to-day life? Is there anything that can get worse besides just the pain of the back?
That's a good question. Some things that I've seen is mobility, a change in mobility, but I usually work those together. Um, it's interesting because it is all connected, right? So if you're experiencing lower back pain, what else is happening? So, for some people, I've had clients, what's interesting is they notice that they've had shoulder pain in addition to their stuff, right? And there's an interesting study done by Paul Hodges, and it's a small study, where when you raise your arm, they measured when you raised your arm what happened to the pelvic floor. And what was interesting was that they found that the pelvic floor activated when you raised your arm. So I've had clients dealing with some shoulder pain, because of their symptoms. And once we kind of got in there, now we're also addressing the shoulder as well, building strength in the back, releasing the chest, working through all that as well. So yeah, you can definitely, there can be things that kind of happen in a domino effect, but it might be more indirect than direct, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And now that helps because, yeah, just looking at the different, symptoms and issues that women will be struggling with, it's good to know that, yeah, they're all, it's, our body is connected. We're all, one body. So, when you do something, it does affect everything else. So, that definitely makes sense. Well, if you don't mind sharing, how do women find you? How do they connect with you? Where, and I will put all the information in the notes below this recording, but if you don't mind sharing here.
Oh, perfect. And for anybody that is here today, if you want to dig a little bit deeper, you're more than welcome. I'm opening up my schedule for the week after next. No, or next week. I'm a little lost because we just had March break and now we have Easter.
Confusing, I know.
So yeah, I'm opening up my schedule for next week for some complimentary fitness and pelvic health strategy sessions. So if you want one of those, let me know and I'd be more than happy to set you up with that. So you can find me on Instagram. So at Terrell Baldock. That's the best place to find me. You'll learn so much more about pelvic health. All my fun stuff is there. But I also do have a free Facebook community called Fitness for Lady Parts as well. So if you want to come join that, I offer monthly master classes, kind of like this. So if you want to come on next time, I would love to have you. And you could also find me on my website at www.thebarbellbalance.com.
Love it. I love it. This has been so amazing. I'm just blown away by this went better than like I said, I could keep going.
Oh,
This is really
I
good
love
stuff.
that.
And I so appreciate you and your time and just your energy is so, you're just, I don't know how to explain it, but I mean, ever since we first connected and I found you on Instagram, so it's like, really kind of fun, but even just talking with you, you just have a way of just making people feel comfortable. So, and I love your page. So I would suggest everybody go follow. And if nothing else, yeah, you have great information for informational purposes. And yeah, just sharing the word is really an important thing in this day and age, getting more word out there that we can take control of the things that aren't working and not have that doom and gloom, stamp of like, just live with it.
Right? Exactly. Because you don't have to just live with it. You really don't. And, I'm a believer in, making fitness enjoyable, making, like those lifestyle changes enjoyable. And I don't know, like if it's not enjoyable, you're not going to do it, right? So, I'm not a drill sergeant. I'm not like, yeah. And I just, you know, I enjoy the conversation. I enjoy opening up the conversation because there's nothing to be ashamed of, right? Like there's nothing to be embarrassed of. We're all human. We're going through these things. And, the more that we can talk about it, the more we open it up and, even, you know, we get more research and we can get, the medical side to kind of sort of follow suit soon, right? So yeah, it's important to keep this conversation going and in a positive way, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, like this.
Yeah.
This was amazing. Thank you so much for your time and all of
Awesome.
your tips and just the expertise here has been so invaluable. So can't thank you enough. And yeah, I know that you're going to probably get a lot of people reaching out to you because there was a lot of interest when I brought up this topic. So
Well, good. Well, I look forward to it. And yeah, I'm happy to answer anybody's questions. So send me a DM. I am open.
she is, guys. She's very nice. She's
I'm very
very open and willing to answer. So, well, thank you again very much. Have a beautiful rest of your day. I can't wait to put this on. I will yeah, I will put all of your information below. I'll get that from you and put that all in the notes. And
Perfect.
yeah, so everybody, hope this was very as interesting as it was for me, and more so. So again, thank you, and wish you guys all a wonderful rest of your day or night. Take care.
All right. Thank you.